LOL, it's week 13. There are a handful of things I hope you took from our Creativity Quest 3 work. First, some of you maybe have never crafted a digital video before other than shooting some video with your camera. I hope you found the process of brainstorming, drafting, creating, editing, and producing a short video piece interesting and useful. Second, I hope you take some technical tips from Creativity Quest 3, thinking about size, ratios, screens, transitions, and more. Ideally, these are technical tips that you won't leave behind with this assignment or the specific software that you chose to use, but tips you can put into place as you learn other new technologies and work in different media. And finally, and I know this was a frustrating aspect for probably most of you, I hope you developed an approach to creativity with constraints. You could only use the materials posted on D2L for Creativity Quest 3, and trust me, I know they were limiting. I chose them in part to be. You'll find yourself again and again in a situation where you have to be nimble and flexible and creative and think quickly on your feet in the face of constraints. This week we're talking about tackling creative problem solving, which we'll continue talking about next week too. This week specifically, we're going to talk about maybe the most important aspect of problem solving in entrepreneurial context, and that's problem identification. I would argue the most innovative, productive entrepreneurs are those who can identify problems and intervene by offering a service, a product, an app, or just a new way of looking at or doing things. It's one thing to address a problem if a client comes to you with that problem. It's another thing entirely if you have the ability to identify a problem and address it earlier on, especially if it's a problem people didn't even really know they had. Henry Ford is famous for having said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Customers wanted a faster way to travel, but couldn't have fathomed a motor vehicle as a solution. In this video, I'll share some cases and suggest some approaches for creative problem identifying. And most importantly, I'm going to introduce you to the 6 options for Creativity Quest 4. So here are a few examples of apps created and businesses launched to address problems you maybe didn't even know you had. First, tempo run, which we talked about earlier in class. If you run, you know it's annoying when your music trips you up because one song might be really slow, the next might be really fast, you lose your tempo. You can certainly build playlists on your music player, but here's an app that does the work for you. A second example, fitness tracking for dogs. Whistle is a Fitbit for dogs. Not only does it track what your dog does and how much exercise he's getting, it also allows you to track by GPS, cellular, and Wi-Fi where your dog is in case he runs off. The science behind this is really cool. Another example, loadable laundry carts. I first encountered these when I was teaching in New York City for a summer. The building I lived in had a laundromat, but no change machine. Instead, you could buy a card, load it up from your credit card or cash, and then swipe your card on the washers and dryers. So no carrying around tons of quarters or trying to find somewhere to get change at 2 a.m. when you finally have time to do your laundry. For the laundromat owners, the card readers are relatively easy to install and a lot easier to work with and much more secure than having credit card readers on all the machines. And you don't have to worry about people robbing the machines because there's no money in them. Fourth, front clasp necklaces. I wear necklaces pretty much every day, and 2 things often happen. First, the clasp rotates to the front, so it's visible. It's not a big deal, but I wind up adjusting the class like all the time. Second, and this is infinitely worse, my hair gets caught in the clasp. I have no idea if there's an inventor for front clasp necklaces. Not only helps with these two problems, but they're often easier to put on, especially for people who have arthritis, because they don't have to reach back and behind their heads or have to manipulate a tiny little clasp. And finally, Trunk Club. This is a shopping service. They ship you outfits. If you like them, you keep them. If you don't, you send them back. When I was in grad school, one of my professors had a buyer who did this for her manually. The buyer would go to the mall, pick out outfits, and bring them over to the professor's house. She'd try them on, pick out what she liked, reimburse the buyer, and the buyer would return what she didn't want or didn't fit. I kind of thought this was a bit bonkers, but now I totally get it. With Trunk Club, you start with their artificial intelligence, a style quiz that creates a profile of your preferences, and then you get a personal stylist who works with you. Trunk Club was founded in 2009 by Joanna Van Vleck while she was still an MBA student. Her focus was really on men. Women exist in a shopping-related culture with many outlets for purchasing clothes. Men aren't as enculturated as women, and there are fewer services, or were fewer services in 2009, with men as their primary clients or customers. She attracted an initial $11 million from a venture group, and in 2014, 5 years after its launch, Trunk Club was acquired by Nordstrom for about $350 million. And more and more and more curated and personal shopping sites are popping up all the time for broad markets and for specific narrow markets and for specific products. I want to pause on talking about problem identification to talk just for a minute about our competitive marketplace. You're all probably aware of the time dynamics of today's economy, especially the digital economy. If you have a successful app or product, you can't rest on it because others will quickly capitalize on the idea. For instance, Candy Crush by King made about $4.2 million a day in 2018. And Candy Crush is just one of the games the company makes and markets. If you go to the Android or Apple store, though, and generally search for Candy Match or Candy Match 3, you will find hundreds of similar games. Think about how King has managed to maintain the market for Candy Crush, even in the face of so much competition. Okay, back to creative problem identification and specific approaches. To be able to anticipate what people need before they need it, you have to listen everywhere. And we've talked about listening and researching in class. Pull out your earbuds on the bus the next time that public transportation is working again and we can be around each other again. Listen to what people are talking about. Hang out at a busy coffee shop and be a human satellite dish. Read product reviews on Amazon.com. That's something you don't have to be socially close or physically close to someone to do. Listen on Twitter. Cultivate a feed for particular people you think are important to listen to. When you're watching TV, especially ads, think about how you could potentially do something different or better. Stroll the grocery store. Keep an eye out for people complaining. Key phrases to look for on Twitter or in a store might include, oh, I wish that, if only someone would. It sucks that. I hate that. It makes me crazy when. These are all key cues to you that some sort of intervention, an app or a product is necessary. To be able to anticipate what people need before they need it, you have to listen, but you also have to orient yourself. And by that, I mean entrepreneurs can't just see the world from their personal perspective. No matter what your background or experiences are, they're too limiting. You need to deeply reflect and understand your perspective and what has made it, contributed to it, developed it first. And you have to be able to adopt different lenses and put yourself in other people's shoes. You have to empathize, which means recognizing and deeply connected with the experiences of others. Again, our focus this week is on creative problem finding. We have 3 readings and all focus on problem identification. The first is called Finding a Problem to Solve, and the chapter is full of ideas, techniques, and cases. The second reading argues that the best entrepreneurs search for questions, not necessarily answers. And the third reading offers lessons for finding a problem worth solving and presents cases of young entrepreneurs. You have one creativity case, and it's the coolest college startups that Inc. magazine identified in 2019. Take a look at a few of them. And you have two creativity sparks, both from Entrepreneur magazine. One has a list of 17 rules that entrepreneurs should break, and the other is a list of the worst entrepreneurial advice they ever received. I've posted the assignment for Creativity Quest 4 on D2L. Usually in this class, I assign a massive multi-part group assignment for the final class project. It's focused on identifying an issue or problem on campus and pitching an entrepreneurial approach to that problem. But none of us are on campus right now. We're spread across different time zones and places and commitments. And I didn't really think a big group project made sense. So instead, you have 6 options for Creativity Quest 4. Choose the one that interests you. All 6 are described in the assignment, but I'll run through them here and offer a few examples. As for what apps or software or tools you use and what you produce, that's entirely up to you. Option 1 is to create a few pages for what's become a popular genre, the adult coloring book. Adult doesn't mean R-rated or raunchy. It just means the themes are more appropriate for adults rather than little kids. I created 2 coloring pages as examples to share. The first is one of my favorite quotes from Shonda Rhimes. Dreamers often wind up living in the basements of relatives. I created this in Photoshop by gathering and creating images and then choosing a coloring friendly font for the quote. A second coloring book page I created is based on a slide from class of Seth Godin, whose work we've read this semester. So you can draw from class materials, quotes, images, whatever you found compelling to create a few coloring book pages if you choose to do option 1. Option 2 is to create a creativity goal or vision board for yourself, including at least in part some compelling images and quotes or ideas from class. Regardless of which of these 6 options you choose, do some research. If you're not familiar with the genre of the adult coloring book, look for examples. If you're not entirely sure what vision boards can look like or how to best make them, do some digging. Look for examples, look for ideas, look for tools you can use to create what you want to produce. Some vision boards are created by hand with cutout text from magazines, drawings, and more, and you could certainly use this approach to create yours and then just take a high resolution, high quality photo of it to submit. Some vision boards, though, are created digitally, like this one, which was created in PowerPoint and focuses on verbs: boost, create, breathe, learn, love, save. For option 3, you can choose some song lyrics, either a verse or 2 or an entire song, and redesign them so that the design helps express the meaning of the song. And for option 3, there are 2 deliverables: your design song and a brief explanation. And your explanation should include some connection to class concepts or ideas that inspired you. Here's a design example from a student from a class I taught, where he worked exclusively with text and typographic design, different font faces, different formatting features. Here's an example I found online where the creator uses an interesting blend of graphics and text. Option 4 invites you to create a tip sheet of creativity recommendations for other students based on what you've learned in the class this semester. I've suggested 3 to 5 recommendations because I'd like the sheet to include some details, quotes, references. Here's an example creativity tip sheet created by Unstuck. And you can see how they include advice, lists, compelling, interesting graphics, good quotes, and more. Option 5 is to identify an everyday object and brainstorm ways to make it better using one of the brainstorming techniques we discussed in class. The deliverable of this is 2 parts: your ideas and also the images or files that show your brainstorming process. What you're thinking about creating or pitching or making an everyday object better might be something like this: a diagram or a sketch. This is for cartridges for washing machines that are sort of like ink cartridges and printers, but for dispensing soap and bleach. Evidence of your process might include something like this, if, for instance, you use sticky notes to develop and sort out your ideas. Finally, option 6 is to write a recommendation report in the form of a memo for entrepreneurs that lists and describes 5 key creativity considerations.
This should be written in formal report style and formatted as a memo, and you should draw explicitly from class readings and materials in the report. This is similar to option 4, but option 4 is for you to create a tip sheet, which is much more visual and less texty. Reports in the forms of memos are primarily textual. Memos are a genre of writing. They have some set characteristics, including an opening header. First paragraphs are chunks that provide an intro and overview, and features like headings, lists, and things like tables, charts, and diagrams that are either included in the body or an appendix. So those are the 6 options for Creativity Quest 4. The best way to submit your work, regardless of which option you pursue and what you create, is to save as a PDF. Just about any app or tool you use should allow you to save or export as a PDF file, which will lock down your formatting features and keep the document looking exactly as you want it to. And this is our final class project. I'd like to see you draw from across class ideas, concepts, tools, and techniques in your work. Certainly not across all of the ideas, tools, and techniques and readings and more from this semester, but a couple that you found particularly useful, interesting, and inspiring. I'm happy to brainstorm, consult, answer questions, and help across Creativity Quest 4. Let me know if you're not sure which option to choose. Let me know if you have ideas for one of the options, but you're not sure it's a good fit for the assignment. Let me know if you have any questions about tools, technologies, ideas as you work on the option you choose for Creativity Quest 4.